Thank you very much to all our wonderful speakers. Lots of food for thought there. So, as said earlier, we're going to run, we've only got about 10 minutes for the Q&A. We'll run this through the Q&A section, if you like, on Zoom. If you can't see that, you go to the three dots above more, and then you can open up the Q&A bit, and then please put your questions in there. Just while people do that, I don't know if this is helpful or interesting, but forgive me, as one of the co-organisers of this, I thought I'd just offer just a very short thoughts myself that have just sort of come to me really through listening to the presentations. I did my first set of exams age 11. I found them so stressful. I was ill every morning before them. I couldn't eat. I tried cheating in a French exam when I was 12, but found that even more stressful than the actual exams, so never did that again. When I came back to university as a mature student, I was, as Martin described, totally obsessed with grades. I became ill with stress due to assessments, and that was all of them. I had a panic attack in one of my second year exams, and I think I only managed to calm myself down because I was a mature student. Had I been 20 and experienced that, there's no way I'd have been able to do that. Then as a lecturer, I was one of those lecturers that had far too much marking, but didn't want to give up any of my assessments. I thought exams were a very valid form of assessment, even though I did introduce a lot of other sorts of assessment, authentic assessment, etc., and reflective writing. I think over the last few years, as a university senior manager, I've become less and less keen on exams, particularly due to issues, as has been mentioned, around inclusivity and well-being. Our university is very much looking at a new assessment and feedback policy that reduces exams across the board even more than they already have done. So questions please for our panel. So for Nick, Martin, Florian, and Tony, any questions? So there's one here from Steve. He says, I work in learning technology, support the Faculty of Science at Durham. We have a lot of staff who are very worried about AI and are, as a result, insisting on a return from open book exams of the pandemic back to in-person exams as they see this the only way to guarantee integrity. Should I agree with them? I mean, something that we're probably all very familiar with colleagues who say that. Who wants to come in and have an answer for this one first?
Well, I'm just going to add a little bit of context, if that's all right, because basically I'm asking the assembled grouping here to start to do my job for me, which is kind of what AI is slightly for, but this is a human form of that. We are being asked about this at Durham, as I'm sure every institution is, about how best to field this, and we're coming up with some guidance, but it often seems like we're kind of second guessing where technology is going to be in 3, 6 months, a year's time, and so on. So it's very hard to pin down an answer with this. I just kind of wanted to gather a flavour of people's opinions on this, whether they're obviously facing the similar kind of question at their institutions and what it is that they're doing about this. Because we can't really support necessarily face-to-face in-person exams across all of our modules, even though some of the staff would like that to be the case, literally for logistical reasons. We don't have enough rooms, we don't have enough people to kind of run, mark, invigilate, etc., whatever, all this kind of thing. So some of the open book exam things that have run in the past have worked quite successfully, and maybe a halfway house between adjusting the nature of the things that we ask the students to do is the way forward. But I'm just curious as to people's opinions on this.
Yeah, thank you. Just quite conscious of time. Nick, is this something you'd like to come in on first, perhaps?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, institutionally, we're not going back to exams, at least for the next kind of couple of vice chancellors, whatever the turnaround there is. And I think the one of the things we perhaps need to get away from is that the skills that we're developing in our students who will spend a lot of time kind of honing these skills to get good grades around exams are not really the appropriate skills for the workplace. And there are other mechanisms I think we can mitigate against it. I mean, this is going to be a moving target. But by doing things like including reflective components into assessment, where we're asking students to comment on how they've attacked a piece of coursework or problem over a period of weeks. And there are certain kind of academic integrity things you can do inside that, because if a student is writing a piece of work that they struggled on something for a week and then had a realization that actually this was the way to proceed, then hopefully as a lecturer you will have observed that in the coursework support sessions or the teaching sessions where the students are working on this. So you can marry the written submission of how I went about solving this problem to the thing that you observed. And that's one way of mitigating against that. And I'm sure a well-crafted prompt where a student dumps in all the relevant information and then the AI writes it for them, you're not necessarily going to spot that, but then maybe that's okay, because maybe what's actually happening there is that the student has identified all the things that are important for this piece of assessment, and they are then getting support with writing. I know it's a bit more kind of nuanced than that, but maybe that's one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I often reflect on the fact that I've been working since I graduated now for 29 years, and I've never once had to do a sit-down face-to-face exam in the workplace. But I have, over the past 2 years, extensively used AI to help me with my job. You know, who doesn't? So that's the normality of the workplace. So surely some kind of assessment or work practice, study practice within an undergraduate or a postgraduate degree that engages with the AI and makes use of it is more representative of what people are going to go on and face in their future working lives. Sure.
Martin, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I hear this all the time, and the way that I respond is really dependent on the vociferousness of the whether the arms are folding and there's tutting and sighing and huffing and puffing and irritation. You have to dig beneath the surface and say, why is the academic integrity piece more of a priority than student well-being and student learning and validity of assessment? Why does this suddenly take preeminence where, you know, we've had essay mills around for a long time and documented cases? Check out those links at the end of my slides. Up to 80% of students over the past 5 decades, admitting to cheating in some form or another. A lot of it, in my view, is down to what we perceive to be cheating in a lot of cases, and what we're fighting against. You know, proofreading, for example, is not allowed on summative assessments in most exams, institutional academic integrity policies. Why the heck not? It's sensible to get somebody to proofread your work, but it's not allowed because it's inappropriate third-party support. And yet, you know, if you're privileged enough to have parents who went to university and did similar discipline to you, you'd be an idiot not to stick your essays under their noses. And, you know, I think we've got a real problem with culture and assumptions, and students have to suffer in the way that I suffered and all this kind of stuff. And it feeds into these narratives of let's make sure that they're all doing it and it's our job to check them. No, it's our job to educate them. And let's focus on our role as educators and look at the negatives and downsides. Look whether there's an appropriate place for an assessment that's in controlled circumstances, but not assume that it has to be in a massive hall with everybody hands down writing, because everybody handwrites these days, don't they? Of course they do. You know, and think a little bit more creatively about this. I gave some examples. I think they're applicable to maths, and I don't see why they shouldn't be scalable. I put an example in the chat about OSCEs. Call it an exam if you like. It's got exam in the word, observed structured clinical examinations, but they're much, much more authentic, dialogic, supportive where necessary. And you work towards these as something that reflects the nature of the work that you're going to do. I think the applicability is much broader than that, and we could learn a lot from other disciplines as well.
Thank you. There was a comment in the chat that I think it would just be helpful to get an answer on. Nick, I think it was during your presentation, someone asked, I think you were talking about students handing in a first draft, and someone asked, but what if students don't show you an early draft? Is that something that you would just, if because that's formative, they just wouldn't get that mark, or how do you manage that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a formative point, so there's no mark associated with that. I mean, the point about that is it allows me to kind of have a conversation with the student. Okay, why have you chosen this data set? Why is this data set interesting for you? And for me to think of something that interests me about that data set and ask that question to the student. So yeah, if they miss that deadline, then I tell them, well, just next week, the week after, or whatever, but be aware that you're not giving yourself a huge amount of time to get that extra question before the final deadline. And of course, then if there's any deferral that needs to be made or reasonable adjustments or whatever, we can do that. But ultimately, management asked me to submit grades by a certain date, and that's the date that both I and the student are working towards. It feels like a partnership there.
Yeah. I'm very aware of time. Michael, Kevin and Rachel, I'm just assuming that we have a 4 p.m. Deadline, and obviously with being a deadline, we are sticking to our deadlines.
Yep, no extensions.
Yeah. In that case, I think it's over to you, perhaps for concluding comments. But I mean, I'd just like to say thank you to all our speakers. I've certainly found this very interesting, so thank you to all of them and the organisers as well.
Yeah, thanks, Noel-Ann. But I think you missed two real key people out in those thanks, which are yourself and Tony, because you put this together. I think this isn't just a one-off. This is something that you've been running for a couple of years now through in-person workshops, and I think they've been hugely popular. And you can see from the level of discussion here today that there's lots of challenges that we're navigating. And I thought Martin's points around AI perhaps being the game changer for something that we should have done a long time ago, I think are certainly quite valid. And I think there's lots of difficult issues that we need to unpick here, but I think the real strength that we've got is the knowledge that we have in the community, the ideas and the willingness to share those. So I think big thanks to Martin, to Nick and Florian for being so willing to do so. Personally, I suspect you and Tony may well find yourself organising another one of these in the future. I think we're determined, Noel-Ann, to get you back and it not be another 5 years next time. But I think seriously, I think you've done a sort of really brilliant job at getting a debate going here. I think this is something that we do need to talk about as a community. And I agree. I don't think a response of straight back into the exam hall for absolutely everything is the right way to go as a mitigation strategy for AI. So I think this assessment diversity piece, for a range of reasons, is something we should explore, not losing sight of the fact that we have a more diverse range of students coming into higher education. So I think you've brought out some really key messages. So I think a real or virtual TALMO round of applause for Noel-Ann and for Tony and for Martin, Nick and Florian. Very well, I think deserved a really fascinating session. So thank you all.